If you're thinking about moving to Boston, you really need to watch this video. While the city certainly has its perks and advantages, there are plenty of reasons to avoid moving here. But first, we express our love for Boston through apparel. Check out our Etsy store for more info. Disclaimer, I do love living in Boston, but it does come with some of the considerations that I'm going to mention in this video. Let's dive in. First, Boston is really freaking expensive. The Back Bay neighborhood of Boston is actually the second most expensive zip code in the country, even ahead of neighborhoods in New York City. Renting an apartment that isn't far away from city center is no small financial lift. According to apartments.com, the average price of a studio in Boston is $2,875 per month. The average price of a one-bedroom apartment is $3,443 per month. The average price of a two-bedroom apartment is $4,418 per month. And the average price of a three-bedroom apartment is $5,817 per month. Note, these are the average rents in Boston proper, but neighboring cities like Cambridge and Somerville will have similar rents. Homeownership is no easier in Boston. The average price of a home in Boston is $758,000, and it's not like you get a lot for this price. Homes below this average usually have some compromise that you're going to have to make. You're probably getting a smaller, older home that may or may not have a garage. Simply the cost to own a home in Boston appears to be an anecdotal reason why people are choosing to leave Boston. Sadly, they're not leaving fast enough to drop home prices. Shout out to Numbeo. This is not a paid ad, rather thanks to them for having a free site to compare cost of living across not just the United States, but the whole world. What we're looking at here is a table with indices for cost of living and rent for US metro areas. Per data from Numbeo, Boston has the 5th highest cost of living in the US, in the same stratosphere as Northern California and higher than cities like Seattle, Los Angeles, and Washington, D.C. Everything costs more here. Groceries, restaurants, car insurance, and even heat in the wintertime. You definitely need to have your budget in order if you want to become a new Bostonian. The good news is that employers typically adjust wages in Boston so that they're higher than other parts of the country, but even with this boost, it can still be tough to deal with the cost of living in Boston. If you're considering moving to Boston, cost of living needs to be the first thing on your mind. Second, Boston has cold winters, and it gets a lot of snow. You ever heard about nor'easters? The good news is that, in my experience, the temperature here isn't usually the worst in the country. It's when you factor in the amount of snow in short periods of time and the wind, which results in a wind chill and real feel that's very low. The numbers back this up too. Per NOAA climate data from 1991 through 2020, Boston averages 49.2 inches of snow per year. Of major metro areas in the US, Boston averages the 8th most snowfall per year, right about the same as Minneapolis and Denver. It could be worse. You could be getting about twice that much each year in Buffalo or Rochester. The interesting part to me is that even though Boston is the metro area with the 8th highest amount of snowfall per year, it has the 13th amount of snowy days, or days with more than 0.1 inches of snow per year. To put it in perspective, even though Chicago has almost a foot less of snow per year than Boston, it averages 5 more snowy days per year than Boston. What does this mean though? It means that when it does snow in Boston, it really snows. Nor'easters are no joke. You have to prep for these just like you would for a hurricane or a tropical storm. You have to make sure that you have food and water, although it is a good excuse for a movie marathon, assuming your power stays on the whole time. Boston also has the highest average annual wind speed of any American metro area. Yes, even more than Oklahoma City, where the winds blow sweeping down the plains. Hold on to your hats when walking the streets of Boston. The wind makes the feels like temperature even colder in the winter, which takes away from the one redeeming quality of Boston winters, and that's that the temperature isn't usually that terrible considering the amount of snow that the area gets. Boston gets less freezing days per year than cities like Baltimore, or days where the minimum temperature went below 32 degrees Fahrenheit. And this is less than Baltimore, which is 6 hours southwest. So yes, it does get cold, but there are 18 US metro areas that average more days where the minimum temperature dips below freezing than Boston. So if you hate the windy, cold with lots of snow, you might want to reconsider moving to Boston. Although I will say they've got the infrastructure to deal with snow here figured out. I've never lived anywhere where the roads get cleared as quickly as in Boston. Third, while Boston does have public transportation, it's okay. And it's not as efficient as other public transportation systems that I've ridden on in both the US and the world. As a huge proponent and user of public transportation, I feel bad listing this as a reason not to move to Boston. Yes, it is a good thing that Boston has public transportation. Most big cities in the US can't say that. However, Boston public transit system, known as the T, has been riddled with performance issues in recent years that stem from a combination of lack of funding, lack of quality leadership, and other issues. Seriously, just 2 years ago, an Orange Line train, which rides on one of the newer lines, caught on fire one afternoon. The entire line had to be shut down for a month for repairs. Philip Ng is the new general manager of the MBTA. He's the same guy who fixed the Long Island Railroad. He's visibly working to build a better T and prioritizes safety repairs on the tracks above all else. However, this does involve sacrifice by riders today, as slow zones are implemented all over the T, resulting in much longer ride time. The good news is that after a couple of years, slow zones are starting to disappear, but there's still work to be done. Additionally, I'm concerned that enough people have lost faith in the T in the past couple of years that it will take time to regain the trust of the T and to see an increase in ridership. There are certain other constraints that have to be worked around with the T that are kind of out of our control. For example, the Green Line houses a section of tracks of the first ever subway system in America, and due to this constraint, this line can only use certain types of trains and not some of the slick new ones that you see on the Orange Line. Really, just know what you're getting into if you plan on relying on Boston's public transportation. It's not all sunshine and rainbows with the T, although I really do hope that if someone is watching this video in a few years, things have improved and the T is far more reliable than it is today. I'm rooting for the T. When people can't rely on public transportation, they have to hit the road in their own vehicle, which leads to lots of traffic in Boston. Lack of reliable public transportation is just one issue that contributes to the ridiculous amount of traffic you will encounter on Boston roads. There are quite a few other reasons for the bad traffic here. First, many of the roads near Boston City Center and in the center of surrounding towns have existed since before the invention of automobiles. They're not easy to drive on, and they create confusions that slow drivers down, as well as weird intersections with strange light timings that each contribute to congestion. Also, Boston is so old that the city of Boston and surrounding towns sort of grew together. Because of this, the greater Boston area can't just build highway loops like newer cities that can build loops prior to expanding and anticipate future growth. When the greater Boston area did build highways, they built interchanges that just don't make any sense. To get on the highway at incredibly busy interchanges, you have a very small space to merge onto the highway while concurrently dodging traffic that's trying to get off of the highway. This causes backups at just about every day of the week at every interchange in the greater Boston area. So the infrastructure of the roads is a recipe for traffic to begin with, and then you add to that the fact that there are a ton of people who live in Boston, and that number of people living here continues to grow, so there's just not enough space for the amount of people who want to be on the roads. And to make matters even worse, the drivers here, affectionately called massholes, are terrible at driving. I had one person tell me that Boston drivers aren't bad drivers, they're just really, really aggressive, which to me translates to unsafe, which leads to accidents, which, you guessed it, only causes more traffic. If you are watching this and you're a proud masshole, check out a masshole shirt from our Etsy store. So yeah, if you hate traffic, don't move to Boston. Another con of living in Boston proper is that there are tourists everywhere. Sure, living in the North End would be enchanting. You'd think coffee, cannoli, pizza, and the best Italian restaurants right at your fingertips, footsteps away, parks are close by, and you're pretty much in the heart of Boston. Beacon Hill would be charming, and Fenway would keep you close to all the action of the Red Sox. However, if you live in one of these areas or any other area that is a destination, and there are a lot of destinations in Boston, you have to dodge a sea of tourists anytime you're trying to get from point A to point B, especially in the warmer months and on weekends. Transit times need to be adjusted to account for how you'll be able to get around when visitors are lost on the sidewalk. Even if you don't live in one of these areas, you still need to plan your transit around these areas during peak time. Do you plan to commute on the Green Line? Well, pay attention to when the Red Sox are in town. Do you need to just go a few miles from Charlestown to Southie? See the traffic discussion that we just had and hope you aren't going south on I-93 during a big event at TD Garden. Next, if you enjoy nightlife, Boston probably isn't the city for you. Thankfully, I'm at a point in my life where this isn't a huge deal to me, but I do feel for those who move to a city the size of Boston and expect more from the nightlife. For a myriad of reasons, the nightlife here is poor. Bars do tend to close early. Perhaps this is due to lack of demand. It's tough to stay out at the bars, though, for a long time because the cost of living also makes food and drinks more expensive, so you can't go out for 6 hours because you spend a few $100s. Also, the state of Massachusetts already doesn't allow happy hour, so pre-gaming is harder. Furthermore, the T, for as average as it is, does not run past 1 a.m. So if you want to stay out late, you have to catch an Uber to get back home, which isn't the end of the world, but Ubers here are more expensive than a quick ride on public transportation after a few drinks. Until addressed, these types of laws and policies will continue to negatively impact Boston nightlife. Boston has recently hired a director of nightlife economy, nicknamed a nightlife czar. Maybe this individual could work to fix these issues. Fingers crossed, similar to the T, hopefully if I watch this in a few years, the nightlife in Boston has taken a turn for the better. I guess if you have to live in Boston and nightlife is incredibly important to you, you could just plan some weekend trips down to New York City to take advantage of the world-class club scene there. It's a quick flight or train ride away and an easy weekend trip if nightlife is your priority. The last reason for avoiding Boston like the plague is how hard it can be to meet people here. Look, this could just be my experience, but it appears as though there are others who have been been in a similar situation, although these are just anecdotes. Boston is full of transplants, many who don't plan to stay long term. It seems like it's really tough to get into any local groups of friends that are already well established, which is fair. Why make friends with transplants who are just going to leave in a couple of years? I found rec league, sports, and work as good places to meet new people, but Boston has proved harder than other places I've lived. Friends who I have met in Boston through these activities have all agreed that the people who are from here tend to stay in their high school friend groups. And I say this as someone who grew up in a city, Austin, Texas, that is filled with transplants. But my friends from back home have made friends from people from all over who have moved to Boston. Boston appears to be the opposite. Unlike our discussion on the weather, I have no data to support this claim. It's just my experience. Please let me know in the comments if your experience has different. So this concludes my list of why you should avoid Boston at all costs. Please let me know in the comments if I missed any other reasons why someone would not move to Boston. Please like the video if you enjoyed and subscribe to see similar videos. And one final note, I actually do love living here, but there's cons to living everywhere. I thought I'd highlight some of Boston in this video.